Hello, this is Mr. Bernal. I'm here to talk about the Bethel Christian Schools Science Fair. I got a lot of questions to explain what we're doing again, and I thought it'd be easier to make a video. That way, if any parents or students aren't sure what to do, they can reference this quick video and they can kind of get an update on what to do without me having to meet with me after school or anything like that. So, first off, all students in a lab science or in a junior high science class have to do this. It is due April 6th, 2020, and it will be presented on open house on April 9th at the science fair. It's the second open house that we have. The science fair project counts as a huge portion of the grade. In my classes, it counts for about 2 test grades. Other classes will be similar points, but not necessarily 2 test grades. The project must be measurable, and the results of the project must be able to be represented by a graph. This is a huge important thing. What that means is there's got to be numbers involved. We have to be able to graph it. That's one of the most important things, and we'll see what that looks like a little later. For those of you in life or biology sciences, you can use plants, molds, protists, and other things like that, but nothing else can be used. So you can't use your dog, and you can't use yourself or your brother or anything like that. And the project may contain a control and at least one variable. So please make sure your project can fit all of these guidelines before starting your projects. Please make sure you read all of this before starting your project. And just so you know, for the parents, there's only going to be first, second, and third place ribbon for each class. So each class will have a first, second, and third place. There's not going to be a lot of first places and second places. In class, we talked about this with the student. Here are 3 websites where they can get some decent ideas for whatever project they want to be doing. In some classes, we broke up into little groups. For example, biology, there was a plant group and a bacteria group, so they have a general idea of what to start with. And then they went and found the actual problem they want to start looking. And this is what they would do, the specific problem. And in just a moment, we will spend quite a bit of time explaining what I mean, what we mean when we say a problem. So in general, the science fair project is going to be displayed on a trifold display board. We can see that it's going to need a problem, hypothesis, materials, procedure, data, a graph representing your data, at least 4 pictures, 2 of which need to be in, and then a conclusion. And then we're going to go through what each of those means in just a second. There'll be a little example project to go along. Not really grade appropriate for 7th through 12th grade, although a project with similar difficulty might be okay for like a 6th grade. In addition to the project, your student will display this in front of their class and present it to make sure they actually know what they're talking about. So first up is the problem. This is where the rest of the project hinges on. And on your board, you're going to need to have the problem written in the form of a question, and it must be typed. It's okay to have a weird, fun title. That doesn't matter, but the problem written in the form of a question is important. So here's an example, crazy catapults. But their actual problem, the thing that they're really testing, is how does the mass of a projectile launched from a catapult affect the distance it travels? So this is specific. How does blank affect blank? Everybody's science project should be able to fit. How does blank affect blank? And in both cases, this should be some type of number or something that we can turn into a number. I have a couple examples of students this year who have given me projects, so the ideas I'm going to show you are not able to be used except by those particular students. I had student 1 come up to me and ask, I want my project to be how to build a robot. That's not really a project, it's just a demonstration. Like, building the robot is cool, but it's not going to get any results. So instead, what we said is, how about we look at the design and say, how does the voltage of the power source of the robot affect the speed of the robot? So now that we're saying, how does blank affect blank, now it's a project. Student 2 said, I want to grow plants with eggshells. Not really a project, there's nothing really to measure there, but we flipped it around and made it more sciencey. We said, how does the amount of calcium carbonate, which is a main component of eggshells, affect the growth of plants over time? You can get a awesome looking graph based off of this stuff. We have different amounts of calcium carbonate going in, so now that's a project. Student 3 said, I want to electrocute wood and make the cool patterns. It sounds really awesome, but that's not a project. So instead, we looked it up a bit, And we looked up, how does the conductivity of a liquid affect the length of the scar patterns in wood when using a Lichtenberg machine? Now it sounds awesome, and it's also a project. We're seeing how does the conductivity, which we can measure, affect the length, which we can also measure. So this is really important to get this down. How does blank affect blank? Make sure we can measure both of those. And that should go on the board. Here I have an example, the fun title of a project from last year. But they have their problem over here. How does blank affect blank? That's really important. Next up, we got the hypothesis. This must be typed. Hypothesis is the educated guess. They're guessing what's going to happen. So in this little example project for this problem, our hypothesis is, I believe, that as the mass of the projectile increases, the distance it travels will decrease. They're just making an educated guess on what they think their problem is going to be. Materials, all the materials got to be typed. That's easy. Just put the list on your board. Procedures, make sure you're only changing one thing with your experiment. Sometimes people say, you know, I want to grow 6 different types of plants in 6 different types of soil. That's going to be way too much work. Instead, how about you grow the same plant in 3 different kinds of soil? And the reason I say 3 is because there should be at least 3 changes to your variable. And each change needs at least 3 trials to ensure accurate results. So every time you do something, you're going to need to do it a total of 3 times to make sure what you did actually worked and actually made sense. And here's the example for launching a projectile in a catapult or something. So they have the procedures list, must be typed. Make sure it's a number. Next up, we got the data, must be typed and must be in table form. This is why one of the reasons why we need it to be in numbers, because we want to see a graph like this and nice, neat numbers. We have the first projectile launched. It's a half a kilogram. We launched it 3 times, so we got 3 different values and we write it down. We then just use heavier objects here and get different distances here. And we put it into a nice graph that when I put it on a board, it's not going to be very confusing. As a teacher, as the judges, I'm going to be able to understand what's going on. So let's go ahead and look at what that looks like. We see the hypothesis right here. I believe that as distance between the 2 cans increases, the force they feel decreases. So he guessed at what he thinks is going to happen. He has the materials list down here. Not very many materials here. And he has all of his data down there. We can zoom in just a little bit. We have all the data right here. This is the AP Physics level project, so there's a little bit of math that you can't see here. But he has at least 3 changes, and he did each one 3 times. So 3 changes and 3 trials. This is all extra because he's AP Physics. I held to a slightly higher standard, but 3 changes 3 times. That's incredibly important, and this is really easy to see. This leads us to the next part, our graph, arguably one of the most important parts. You have to have at least one graph that displays all the data. You can have more, that's fine. But they all need to be neat and orderly. They need to be able to be understood, and they need to be labeled correctly. So here's one I made for this imaginary project. We have the mass on the bottom, because that's the thing we are changing. And we have the distance on the y-axis, because that's the thing we're measuring. So particle that was 0.5 kilograms only went, this distance. This particle went this distance, and this projectile went that distance. In this project, we see as the distance increases, the force changed a bit. So this is based off of this data right here. And if you do not know how to make one of these graphs, there's plenty of things online that can do that. I'm also available after school on Thursdays or Fridays to help your student do that. Pictures, there's got to be 4 pictures. The student needs to be in 2 of them at least. Here we see 1, 2, so he's good on the pictures. Lastly, we got the conclusion. Should be directly related to the hypothesis, meaning you should just simply say, were you correct or incorrect about that guess? And it's 100% okay if your hypothesis was wrong. That's kind of what science is about, making a guess and seeing if you're right or not. If you're not right, you still learn something that's still good. In addition, you need to answer at least 3 of these questions. And there's a list of 5 questions there. Here's an example of the conclusion, a short 4-sentence paragraph answering 3 of these questions and saying whether or not the hypothesis was correct or incorrect. If we look over here, we have the conclusion up there. A short 4-sentence paragraph. He's good on that one. And so you can see everything at once. Lastly, your student will be expected to present this in class. So these are kind of the questions that they should know how to answer in class. If I ask them, why is this problem even relevant? They should be able to say, there's some relationship between the stuff that you're testing. If I ask them what the hypothesis is and they don't know, that's a really bad thing. They should know what their guess was. They should know what their procedure was. They should know how they did the measurements. They should know how to read their graph. They should know their conclusion. It's okay if they quote that directly from the project. That's completely fine. They're allowed to have, their board in front of them. They can have some note cards. If they did any math or they used any charts to find the information that they needed to do their project, they will definitely want that with them, and they'll want to show me that. And they also will need to know stuff about the project that if I don't know when I ask them, they should be able to answer. And I can think about, in this example project, if they use this word, if they drop this Lichtenberg machine, and I don't know what that is, I should be able to ask the student, and they should be able to tell me what that is in the presentation. With this information, a student hopefully will be able to get a good project going, get a good problem going, and be on their way to working on a great science project. Once again, I am always available after school, Thursdays and Fridays, to help any students that may have a question about their problems, about their procedure, about maybe how they're measuring anything. Any help they might need, I am available after school on Thursdays and Fridays.